Southeast Asia and the Pacific Region, Chapter 9. We're going to focus on two countries today, Vietnam and Australia. So, Vietnam is a communist country, and it has a lot of similarities with in the path that they've chosen with China. They allow some private ownership and free enterprise, but not all the way. And this is just an example of some of the export markets that they have, so lots of exports. Decades of conflict and war. From 1946 to 1954, the Nationalists and the Communists fought France for independence. This is after World War II, and France wanted them back, and they didn't want to be taken back by the French. But then, from 1959 to 1975, the Vietnamese fought a civil war amongst themselves. Vietnam was divided when the French left into North and South. And there was supposed to be elections in the South Vietnam, but the U.S. canceled them partially because they thought the communists would win. And there was a real belief in what was called the Domino Theory. And here's an example of it. This idea of that if Vietnam were to fall, then Laos would, then Cambodia, and so on. And this is all really important from the perspective of understanding that this is during the Cold War, when we are very worried about communist expansion. In 1959, North Vietnam invades South Vietnam, just like North Korea invaded South Korea. And the communist leader of the North was Ho Chi Minh, and his forces were called the Viet Cong. It's a very famous image of this guy is dead. He just hasn't hit the ground yet. I said that before in class. But this is a police officer from South Vietnam, and he has gone ahead and shot this guy because he believes him to be a Viet Cong. And you really can't tell who's Viet Cong because they don't wear uniforms for the most part. They just try and kill you if you're on the wrong side. So it's very guerrilla warfare tactics. The U.S. stepped in, and to support South Vietnam's government, the U.S. sent military advisors first, and then hundreds of thousands of troops. To stop the North from getting supplies down this Ho Chi Minh Trail here, the U.S. bombed South with South Vietnamese help Cambodia and Laos, and sort of expanded the war there. Now, the home front, the war dragged on. Many Americans died, and that led to it being very unpopular. There were demonstrations in the U.S., and they wanted to end the war. In 1973, the U.S. pulled out. And 3 million had served in the war, 58,000 had died, and 150,000 had been seriously wounded. With the U.S. gone, North Vietnam came in and conquered South Vietnam in 1975 and 1976. They reunited it into one big country. More than 1 million Vietnamese had died, and so now they needed to focus on the rebuild, and this is the evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. With their rebuilding, it's hard because they did allow some free enterprise, but most poor Vietnamese are still farmers. So rice plantation or a rice crop that's being farmed, and so there's not a whole lot of resources. Now Saigon is kind of the biggest city, or was the biggest city in South Vietnam, and then it got taken over and renamed Ho Chi Minh City. And it's very much a modern city that would fit just about anywhere in the world, including America, and has a lot of the same sort of prosperous things that we have in our cities. Vietnam has encouraged foreign investors to set up businesses and factories, and is a relatively fast-growing economy, so if you see all the different things that they're into. Now Australia is a Pacific Rim country. It focuses a lot of its trade on the countries along the Pacific area, and it's a major player in trade with places like Japan, China, South Korea, Taiwan, and the U.S. And it's a major exporter of wool, cattle, sheep, and minerals. And here sheep are being loaded onto a ship for transport. Now farming in terms of Australia is important, but there's a problem in that only 7% of the land is good for farming. So there's few rivers, and those are mainly in the southeast area over here. And the biggest crop is wheat, but the problem is that due to climate change, there's sort of this weird weather pattern going on, and that's sort of why in Australia there's more attention being paid to it now than there once was, because they're seeing some of the major effects. Now ranching, it's a major part of the economy, major. And they ranch sheep for wool and for meat, cattle for meat. There's some of the largest ranches are in the area called the Outback. The Outback is the dry land in the center and the west where few people live. It's so dry that They need artesian wells where the water comes up without even pumping. This here, yes, that's Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman from the movie Australia. Focuses on life on a ranch. The Aborigines are trying to improve their lives, and there's been a movement to preserve the traditional way of life in schools, and to try and preserve the Aboriginal language. But the biggest thing that's right now a problem with the Aborigine population is this idea that they would like their land back. Got taken from them, but the ranchers, they clearly don't want to give it back because they feel like they're entitled to it too. So that's it, and we are